Let's now look at some other functions which allow us to manipulate arrays. In PHP.NET, in a search, let's start typing array underscore reverse. And what does it do? It basically returns an array with elements in reverse order. And if we look at the description, we obviously have array as the first argument, and then there's a parameter which tells us whether we want to preserve keys or not. That's what it takes. It takes an input array and returns a new array with the order of elements reserved, and then parameters, input array, and obviously if set to true, numeric keys are preserved. Non-numeric keys are not affected by this setting and will always be preserved. And it's pretty simple, basically. So if we go back to our editor, if we look at our languages, I'm going to remove what we've got here with this unset function, and let's use this array reverse, and we're going to pass the first argument as our languages, and we're not going to provide a second one, so it's going to be, by default, it's going to be false. And this time, because the argument isn't taken as a reference, this specific function will return the array in reverse order. So what we need to do is basically associate it with a new variable. So let's give it languages reversed. And now, rather than this languages, let's pass the print the languages reversed array to this print function. If we now save it, go back to our browser, refresh the page, you see we are starting from Polish and ending with English, as opposed to English ending with Polish, basically. So that has reversed our items in the array. And as you can see, obviously, because these indexes aren't integers, they obviously have been preserved as this specific sentence here says non-numeric keys are not affected. So if we go back and try with the numerical values, let's just manually type 0, 1, 2, 3, and rather than 4, let's say use 10. We'll see what's going to happen. If we now save it and preview everything in a browser, refresh the page, you can see we have 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it resets them basically, rather than keeping as it says, obviously, if set to true, numeric keys are preserved, and because by default it's false, then obviously it ignores numerical values and gives them its own order, basically starting from 0, obviously incremental by 1. So if we go back to the editor, and this time, rather than having it set to false, let's specify that we want to preserve keys. So it's going to be true. If we now save it and go back to our browser, refresh it, as you can see, keys stay the way we did them. Polish had 10 and it's got 10. They are still in the reverse order, but keys are exactly as we specified them. So that's basically our reverse array reverse function. The next function we are going to be looking at is a sort. A sort in our search, and the first item that pops in, if we click on that, that will open the specification for the a sort. And it sorts an array and maintains index association. Okay, if we look at the description, we've got a sort function. We pass in the array as first argument, and as you can see, we've got this and symbol here, which means it takes an array as an argument, so we're not going to be associating the result of this function. Whatever the function returns, as you can see, returns Boolean. It tells us that it's going to return either true or false. So it doesn't return the array. So what happens, basically, we just call this function and we can continue working with this array without actually associating it with the new variable as we did in a previous example. And then the second argument is integer, which comes from the one of the predefined PHP constants. It's called sort flags. This function sorts an array such that array indices maintain a correlation with the array elements they are associated with. This is used mainly when sorting associative arrays where the actual element order is significant. And then obviously we have these parameters which we've discussed, so the input array, and then sort flags tells us that you can modify the behavior of the sort using the optional parameter sort flags. For details, see sort. And if we just open this in the new tab, this sort, you can see you've got this sort flags constants, which tell you to sort regular, compare items normally, don't change types. Then we have sort numeric, compare items numerically, so it basically converts the values to integers and then basically compares them this way, and so on. So basically we are going to just use the standard regular, which is the default option. If you want to go any further, obviously feel free to read a little bit more about these constants and how you can actually use them basically in order to modify the result of this asort function. And obviously return value is boolean, which returns true on success and false on failure. So let's go back to our editor. And now let's remove this association with this languages reversed. We only are going to be working with the languages because obviously this first argument of our asort function is taken as a reference, and we're going to remove the second argument. We are going to use the default regular comparison basically when they are reversing the order. Sorry, not reversing the order, when they are sorting the items in this array. So if we save it, preview everything in a browser, and if we refresh the page, you can see we've got E, F, G, P, S. We can just, for the sake of giving it a try, use this sort numeric, and we'll see what result this is gonna give us actually. So a second argument after comma, sort numeric, and if we now go back to the browser, refresh the page, and as you can see, it takes a completely different approach, obviously. So that's how you can obviously use this these different flags, the constants actually, in order to manipulate the results. We can try the source string, obviously, which is normally going to work pretty much the same way as we did without specifying anything, because all of these items are strings. So if we go back to the browser, refresh, and as you can see, we follow the same result as before, because obviously the values inside of this array are strings anyway. So that's the asort function. Let's now try and search for another one, which is arsort, which is basically asort is for for the ascending order, and obviously arsort will be for descending order. So sort an array in reverse order and maintain index association. Obviously don't change indexes, and arguments are exactly the same way. It works exactly the same way as the other one. It's just basically the opposite way in terms of sorting the items. So if we go back to our editor, we can remove this second argument and just change asort to arsort. If we save it, go back to our browser, refresh the page, as you can see, it's now in the reversed order.